So a few weeks ago, sometime last month, I was in Delaware getting my hair done, and I was standing in a very long line to get coffee on a Sunday morning. And someone who lives there locally, I guess, came and was standing behind me in line. We were standing outside because the line was that long. And he was maybe my age, maybe a little bit older, very well put together, very cross of planning. You could tell he was successful in the cross of planning. And he said something like, I love this coffee shop, but they have no sense of urgency. And I said, I think the sense of urgency days are behind us. And then just kind of turned around. And then he said something about wanting to open a coffee shop that only serves drip coffee. You know, you could put your own shit in it somewhere else, but doesn't serve any of the other stuff. And I was like, well, I wouldn't be able to go to your coffee shop. And then just turned back around. He's very friendly, very nice. But then he says, so how do we get the sense of urgency back? And this is over the course of like 15 minutes that we're sitting in this line. And I said, I was feeling very open that day and very authentic. And I said,
let me tell you about human design.
I said, well, the sense of urgency is a construct of the reality that we were living in. And we're moving into something different. So it's not really coming back. It's not going to be a way of life anymore. And then I said, and it'll get worse, and the infrastructure will collapse, and we will just operate differently. But the new thing will be, you want coffee that's good and fast, you just make it at home. Or you could open your own coffee shop if you wanted to try to get it done that way, but you'd have a hard time finding employees that could be fast. And then he goes, oh, he doesn't respond. And I would have killed, I don't know how to say this without sounding like I'm sucking my own dick, but I would have killed to meet a me at some point in my life. To just have someone say some shit like that to me, I would be like, so wait a second, what? What are you talking about? And he didn't look at me like I was nuts. He didn't, he more or less was like, well, I don't really like that answer because I would like my coffee faster, And then he made a couple more small comments about the coffee. But I just think it's such an interesting moment we're living in where there are people saying things like that or talking about the end of the world. It's almost like normalized these conversations that we're having that don't make someone say like, what the fuck are you talking about?
I bet you he said that. He just said that to his buddy after he left. I'd die to have a conversation with that guy outside the coffee shop later once he's done waiting for his mediocre coffee for a half hour, talking to some wild bitch that was like, cross of planning is not, it's over. Process leaving Phoenix is now here. He thought you were fucking batshit crazy.
He's like, I have not had enough caffeine yet to have this conversation with this wacky bitch.
It's interesting that he even came back and asked you a second time, like, wait, so how do we get it to come back? Like, that he was even considering that what you were saying was something that he should be listening to. Yeah,
and to be honest, I feel like I'm pretty good at reading people's energy, especially if their energy is saying that there's something wrong with me. And he really didn't. He either took that and slowly digested it, or it just went straight over his head.
Yeah.
Because he was really pretty determined to have a conversation about.
He wanted to complain.
Yeah. And the thing that was funny was once we got up to the line, like there was 2 lines, they were like, Jerry, how are you? Like they know him and shit. And I'm like, you guys, he's been talking mad shit about you guys the whole time we've been in line. He doesn't really care for you that much. He doesn't think you have a sense of urgency. Oh, I did say that. That was how the conversation ended. I said all of that, and I said the infrastructure will collapse and whatever. And then he said, well, there's got to be a way to get it back. After I said, you can open your own coffee shop, but you'll have a hard time getting people to work fast. And then he said, well, there's got to be a way. And I was like, well, you could try paying them a living wage. And then that's when he kind of like tuned out. He probably didn't like that part. People who are successful in the Matrix don't like that
when they
idea.
hear it's falling apart.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because I have the same observations in daily life sometimes where if I'm wanting to get somewhere quick or am, getting some kind of customer service that is slow and I need to be somewhere or I have something to do, I'm sensitive to it. I'm like, what the fuck? Everybody is just meandering. Like, what are we doing here? Like, do your job. It's kind of like, I feel like an asshole. But I also then, on the flip side, when I'm not really in a rush, just doing my own thing, I do enjoy that everybody is kind of starting to operate in their own energy and not, kind of doing things strictly out of obligation and adhering to the pace. I got to go quick for everybody. I do enjoy that everybody's kind of just doing their own thing,
Yeah.
It can be frustrating when we're used to a infrastructure that is like the wheels are greased and it's like it's humming and is really productive. But I see that there's benefit to getting people off of that work line for a bit, that we like move into something that's actually a better way of functioning, where people are actually happier doing what they would love to do, how they love to do it,
Yeah, I feel like it's a double-edged thing, right? And we've really been working on this, deconditioning this since we met. Like, it's been about 5 years. Equally letting ourselves off the hook from hustle culture and productivity and bending ourselves in knots for what other people want. And, we were self-employed by the time we met. But my journey just with like sessions and the Patreon, like the Patreon used to have a strict schedule that I could almost never actually accomplish. And then I would just obsess over the fact that I'm not getting things out fast enough. And now if you're on the Patreon, if you're on like the $5 tier, it's that you get 2 podcast episodes a month. They both come out in the last week, pretty much every month. There are many other tiers who get their stuff faster. It's just kind of the way it works out. But if you book a session with me, it says in the thing, like, I may cancel this last minute. Like, I can't know if I'm in the space to hold space until we're at the session time. And neither can you know if you're ready to like open up and have this conversation. So both of us reserve the right to reschedule up until session time. And both of us, like, you have the right to just cancel the appointment and get your money back. And for me, letting myself off the cross of planning, you are like obligated to be consistent and to keep your promises and to keep your commitments or whatever, which is all cross of planning shit, self-sacrifice for the thing. Letting myself off the hook, but then I have to constantly remind myself that means that everyone else is off the hook as well. And so it's hard for me because I like to move fast. So when I run into the fact that everything is slow now, it's much easier now. But for me, the onus is on me. Like, you can't just roll in and rent a car fast anymore. Like, I tried to rent a car to go, because we only have one car, to go to Delaware. And that turned into like a 2.5 hour ordeal because everywhere is understaffed. And then that one staff member is not getting paid extra to do all that work. So they didn't have like your Lamborghini ready to go. Right. They're not killing themselves for it, nor should they kill themselves for it. And I am almost always in a waiting room. Even if I am feeling impatient, I understand that that's my shit. Like, no one is obligated to kill themselves for their job, even if they're self-employed. Like, everyone's operating at the pace that they can operate, and that just kind of is what it is. And so that's an opportunity for me to look inward and look at my own like internalized capitalism, internalized cross of planning of like expectations of others to operate for me. Where it's for me, it's like you should have gotten there earlier if you wanted to leave on time. So it's frustrating, but I also don't buy into the story where 5-10 years ago when I was in customer service, I guess 10 years ago when I was in customer service, I was very a very dedicated sense of urgency, had to be the best at my job, you know, every customer had to love me kind of conditioning. And then when I went out into the world, I expected that as well. You know, I was actually always pretty tolerant of like a server having a bad day or whatever. Customer service sucks, and a lot of people take advantage of that. So I've never been like a speak to your manager type, because that's cop shit. But like, I did expect things to go fast and for people to be dedicated to their job the way that I was dedicated to my job. And we used to have gas in the tank to do that because of the cross of planning, but we just simply do not now. We have gas in the tank for Cross the Sleeping Phoenix shit, which is like personal expression. And I was talking to someone about this the other day, and I guess we've probably already said this on this podcast, but part of the reason that people are not making a living wage energetically, I'm talking about energetically, like physically, it's because corporations have become like insanely greedy. But energetically, part of the reason that I saw a TikTok that said, you know, being a mailman used to be like middle class. Like I remember when I was young, like if you could get a job being a mailman, like that you were living large, right? And now they live in poverty. And the people who are seeing success, the group of people who are seeing success are largely the industries that are booming are industries of people expressing outside of the herd, right? So podcasters, TikTokers, YouTubers, like TikTok has its own economy of people who are making their crafts, but they've also learned how to express who they are. Like we buy so much household stuff now from people who make their own soaps, from people who make their own, you know, household items. I'm buying like spice collections for dinners from a woman who just makes them at home, and they just get on the internet and they let people know what they're bringing to the table, and it's slowly decentralizing, and it's through the marketplace of TikTok. I think something like that could exist for a while, but people are becoming like self-employed so they can choose their own hours, and it's through their own personal interests, and people are going to care less and less, and I've been saying this for years, about credentials, about what education you got in someone else's modality, about what kind of certificate you got. Like, that's all cross-planning shit. And really, Pluto and Capricorn shit as well, I believe. Like, Capricorn loves that kind of stuff. But Aquarius is like, no, I want to see let your weird flag fly.
Forfeit flag. Yeah, I love the idea of living in a more decentralized kind of world where everybody can find the craft that they love, the thing that they're good at, and then go straight to some kind of marketplace, no middleman, and then be able to also like control the growth of that. Like, it doesn't necessarily, you know, the recipe spices person doesn't necessarily need to get to some corporate level where they're in every store.
Yes. To
actually like make a good living. It's just about doing as much as they can when it's comfortable. Then it's like they're just going to fill those orders, and if they sell out, then they're going to wait till they make the other one and just do it on their own pace. You know, so many things are so special in the beginning when they're not huge corporate, and then they all have this trajectory of getting really popular and successful, and then they get bought out and it gets watered down and it loses its magic, you know, because of the desire to go corporate and make billions.
The expansion for expansion's sake.
Yeah, and not really keeping the integrity of the product or the service. You lose all of that. It's just so many stories of that kind of thing, you know.
Yeah, I think the Industrial Revolution is really like the crux of the cross of planning. I mean, there are certain things that are like mass colonization, very cross of planning, industrial age, very cross of planning, like expansion for expansion's sake, and kind of like the glorification of the homogenization and the large versions of things. And people are naturally just going to start to move away from that stuff. And it's already happening. And I don't think it has to be a big moral issue. And I want to be very specific about this because I've been talking about this for years, I do not believe that people should quit their job that is comfortable and paying their bills and go try to be a tarot reader. I think you should build a successful, sustainable business while doing your comfortable job. And once you have created something you can live off of, move timelines. It's especially right now, the survival mode, you have to stay out of survival mode as much as possible. So this is a transition that's happening and will continue to happen. So that's not to say if someone's working a corporate job or a government job or a job they don't really like, it's kind of like you're not always going to be there, and you can start to think outside the box, but don't, with rare exception, don't jump off that cliff without.
I wonder how long we're going to be in this little like middle ground as it transitions where, there's like a successful marketplace on TikTok. Instagram has one. These places that are more, they're still not fully decentralized. There's TikTok and Instagram are taking cuts and their censorship and stuff. But until we get to a place where there's like allowed to be a universal decentralized marketplace where like anybody can sell anything with minimal work, and you don't have to go like big box stores, corporate, but like as the infrastructure kind of collapses and we move out of that kind of more corporate driven market, how long will there be the middle ground area, and what will it look like when we get to a place that is actually more autonomous and decentralized? Like it feels like there's going to have maybe this is old world thinking, but it feels like there would have to be some kind of tech or app that kind of pushes that forward and then provides like an opportunity for that to happen. That isn't just the dark web, like underground kind of decentralization. I feel like decentralization is just such a like bad word for the corporate kind of market, because it obviously offers other opportunities for people to go get the things that the big boxes stores are selling, and put them out of business. So it's like, I think in the tech world, Silicon Valley, it's like these decentralized marketplaces, people that are trying to innovate in that space, it's like it's not quite open yet,
Right. Yeah, this is one of those, like, I think it's already happening. I think it's been happening. I can't remember where I said this, but YouTube is deeply decentralized. Oh, this was on a Q&A on Patreon. YouTube is deeply decentralizing and has been decentralizing things for 20 years. We grew up in a world where you had experts that had one niche that did everything. And I could essentially build a house now off of information I can get from YouTube.
Yeah, so it's almost, I see what you're saying.
So it's owned by a corporate thing, but it is decentralizing.
Right. And so now I'm thinking it's actually one of those things that's going to happen on accident via, like, I would say the corporate side of YouTube is trying to, they created this new tool and they've innovated it since it's been created based on what most people that are using it want. And they're doing it because they can make big money on the advertising or on the collecting data and stuff. And so that's what they're hyper focused on. Meanwhile, not being aware that they're building a decentralized world on accident.
Yeah.
Because it is, I think the most valuable thing of YouTube is it's a school for anybody to learn anything. You can find it on there and you can learn it yourself. So that's creating the decentralization. I think even the new thing that I've heard where YouTube is starting to create more of a streaming platform that's essentially going to kind of put the other big streaming services that are just streaming TV shows like Netflix and Hulu. It's going to put some pressure on them because they're going to offer anybody that's a creator on YouTube be able to create a show that you can subscribe to that plays weekly, movies, whatever, and they're doing that for their own benefit corporate wise. But again, this is going to unroll a new place in the internet where anybody can kind of get into what used to be gate kept by a corporate market. They can now get in there. So yeah, I see what you're saying. It's like after a couple years of this, they accidentally create a decentralized world that eventually puts the huge corporate kind of businesses out. Or maybe it doesn't. It just, they don't have as much control anymore. But, you know, they're still there, and maybe they slowly fall off.
Yeah, and I think when we talk about decentralization, we think like the power goes from the government and the corporations to the people. But when I'm talking about decentralization, I'm talking about like a collective program that we've all been running. Like we grew up in a world where this person is a doctor and they are a doctor because they went to school for that. And everyone who didn't go to school for that couldn't possibly know what to do with their own bodies. I was never taught as a person with a female reproductive organs. I was not taught how my fertility works. I was not taught how my cycle works. My mother didn't have that information. She couldn't pass that information to me. Everything was, you ask your doctor. You got to ask your doctor. And then you have the guy who does the stuff on the house. And maybe in the boomer generation, like a lot of the men knew how to fix cars and fix houses. But the way that the cross of planning was set up is that you become an expert in one thing, and then that's your identity. And then everyone goes to you for that thing, and they go to this person for this thing. And so we all had the ability to do like a thing. And other than that, we outsourced everything else. And so we were programmed into a centralized one unit of things, which is an extremely exploitable system. It's also not a sustainable system should the shit hit the fan. You now have centralized food where we think it makes sense that we get our food from some other time in the world so that we can have, you know, I saw a TikTok yesterday, like we're not supposed to have avocados available all year round or strawberries available all year round. Like, but for that convenience, which is how the cross of planning sells it, sacrifice yourself and then you can have all of these things because someone will be doing it. The way that we look at the world is very centralized. The way that we are fighting with each other in this gigantic country, thinking we got to get everyone on the same page about every rule, rather than considering what if we let individuals make their own decisions and we build this thing on kind of a principle of do no harm. But we also evaluate if we're doing mental gymnastics to call something harm that isn't actually harm. It's just somebody else having a different perspective than you, you know? So when I talk about decentralization, I talk about individuals being able to take their power back. Now, the masses aren't going to do this until the unconscious masses aren't going to do this until they have no choice. And so, you know, you can look at your own life and go like we live a pretty decentralized life. You know, we do most things for ourselves. If it's possible to be done for ourselves, we do it for ourselves. If we have someone else do it for us, it's pretty intentional, you know, and we live outside of a lot of societal expectations, not all of them. We still pay taxes, whatever. I haven't figured a loophole there yet. But we live a pretty decentralized life, and more, especially since the pandemic, more and more people are starting to live a decentralized life. Once again, I'm talking about, you know, the United States of America is where I live. So I can't speak about the rest of the world. I haven't been there. So I think the conversation around decentralization, not from you necessarily, but like when people ask about it is like, when will the corporations be gone? And there's also this kind of perception like the corporations or the government are just going to hand the power over. It's the same thing when you like are giving your power to a shitty partner and then you're waiting for them to give it back. And it's like, they're never going to give that back to you. You just have to take it. You just have to take your life into your own hands and slowly decentralize your own life. Slowly learn how to do things for yourself. That's why self-sufficiency is like the theme of the world we're going into. So I think that AI is extremely decentralized. I don't care that a corporation owns it. I have not found one piece of information I can't get the AI to tell me. If I want it to talk to me about conspiracy theories, I go, hey, what do those conspiracy theorists think about time travelers? And get them to, and it tells me. That could change, but Google had become so centralized that you like literally couldn't Google things. After 2020, you couldn't Google and get real information. So far, you know, you have to be creative in how you get it, but you can't, like AI is deeply decentralizing in that neurodivergent people who can't digest the way that information is usually distributed are able to get cliff notes on things, which is for someone like me has opened up an entire world that I did not have access to because I can't just read long form stuff and I can't listen to long form stuff. So I've not been able to learn until AI. I've not been able to learn about a lot of things until AI came along and I can ask specific questions and get specific answers. That's deeply decentralizing, even if a CEO is making billions of dollars off of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think the only thing why people are focused on like when are the corporations going to go away, I agree. There's ways to always do something behind closed doors. Like you can make your life very decentralized with corporate markets still being there. But what I think the focus on like getting the corporations to like loosen their grip on, let's call it like the marketplace or whatever, is because of the immense amount of regulations and control of other people or organizations starting to thrive in a market that's affecting their top dollar number. You know, that when I see that in so many unfair places, you know, there's like the Amish is a good example. Like just recently, I mean, a part of like the election, a huge aspect of them going so diehard for one side was because the current administration had regulated their way of life in such a like overstep that was brutal. I mean, it like crushed businesses and families because they came in with their regulations and hey, this cheese and milk that you're growing does not meet our FDA standards, so we're shutting you down. And really, it's like there was no danger. You know, the FDA is supposed to be there, like we're going to regulate you to keep you safe. You shouldn't be growing this kind of food. And they're stepping in and telling these people that have been doing it for years, generation after generation, are healthy, more healthy than the average person sometimes. They're having this way of life, and the corporations come in and, you know, destroy that based on some kind of we know better, we're protecting you. That happens in so many different places of decentralized marketplaces that are succeeding and are kind of moving towards a better world. And that's what I'm saying is like almost anything in Silicon Valley or anything in that corporate world that's being innovated and then brought to market always has some backdoor fucking greed thing that is siphoning off people's energy or their money, but then also has the power now to like regulate the field and squash any kind of competitive player that comes in.
Right, because like the FDA doesn't give a fuck about whether or not it's healthy, because look at our food source.
I mean, 100%.
But they're in bed with, because it's rotten, as I've mentioned before, they're in bed with the corporations who are maybe experiencing some competition from the fact that people are starting to go, hey, maybe I wouldn't like 60 fucking ingredients in my carton of milk. I'm going to start buying it from the Amish. And then all of a sudden the FDA cares about whether or not you live or die.
And that's what they can squash out, like so much innovation. Like we all start to decentralize. People start to find that like, hey, realize that I should be it's healthier to get local sourced meat and milk, and I'm going to get raw milk. I didn't even know that I could go down the street to a farm and like buy raw milk from there. I don't have to go to the grocery store to get milk. And they, doing that is like a beautiful thing. Like we're all going to connect more, and you're going to empower the local farm. But the threat of that, of people starting to find their own way, not only be healthier, it could be cheaper, and it's more community oriented. There's just all the reason in the world for corporate, huge companies to get rid of that, and they have the resources, and then they present it as, we're protecting you, we're protecting all of you because this is the safest thing to do. That kind of centralized thing is dying for sure. It's annoying as fuck, but they still have, like, my feeling is that it's where I'm saying, like, we're in this inner waiting room zone, is getting enough people on board that are not buying into the corporate thing and stop going to those places or stop listening and, insist on this other way, or just maybe it is something that's just underground for a while, and most people are operating in the decentralized marketplaces, that eventually it moves. But I think like it sways into being the norm, but it just always still feels like, not me personally, like I'm in my own power. I don't think corporations have power over me, but I watch it in the collective and in general, how our culture operates. It's captured, like so many places are captured via these huge machines that behind the scenes are working and like tirelessly to keep their business at the forefront, and they will get rid of anyone else behind closed doors. It's not always public, that's the thing that I'm like more pointing to, is that that has to change at some point. Does it change because everybody stops investing in it? Nobody shops at grocery stores anymore, or the main marketplaces. I think that's a little bit of a hard thing to do because it is easier. It's we're still like a culture that I think prioritizes the ease and the whatever convenience is what I was looking for, over the quality. But I think that is shifting more and more, and so I just, that's what I'm kind of like eagerly waiting for, is the corporate arm to cool off and stop trying to stop everyone's innovation. I mean, just even TikTok, it's like that thing is providing such great opportunities for so many people. It's giving them jobs, giving them like happiness. And immediately when that started succeeding and becoming like a real player, they got to fucking regulate it and shut it down. No, this is not safe for your kids. We got to regulate TikTok. And now they're enforcing to try to get rid of it. That's a perfect example. It's like, it's not dangerous. Yes, there's so many things on the internet that can be dangerous, but the primary thing that thing is doing is connecting people across the world and giving people opportunities to sell the thing they love and make money. That's the thing that's dangerous for us. You're going to shut down.
Yeah, I mean, if the government tells you that they're protecting you from something, that should be a red flag that something's up. Someone's stock portfolio is suffering and they need to fix it. Yeah, okay, so to clarify, I'm really I'm not a fan of authority at all, or corporate, any of this. And a lot of this corruption is something that I feel like is really obvious to me a long time before it's obvious to other people. Like, I've been frustrated with this for a very long time. I am not saying corporations are great, let's be in bed with corporations, but I am saying don't wait for the corporations to hand you your power back. Take what is here, what is available right now, and take as much of your power back as you can while it's here. And they will very predictably show up and fuck it up. You know, the difference between TikTok 4 years ago and now is like ridiculous. But work within what we have. I think we have this, when are we going to get to the place where there's no tension or no resistance kind of way of looking at life? When I say we, I don't mean you and I mean the world at large. But That's kind of not how it works. It is a video game. And so find ways to decentralize your own life, your own existence, and reality will start to reflect that back. I believe that reality is a reflection of our internal experience. So our collective internal experience is still very reliant on the idea of a daddy or a mommy outside of us to tell us what to do. It's very reliant on the idea of the collective to tell us what to do. And therefore, every time we start to step out, then we get the reflection of these power structures coming back and pushing back. If people individually start to step into their own power, which is like the biggest theme of the world we're going into, then these power structures will kind of naturally collapse. So the corporations are not going to show up to a group of disempowered people and go, here's your power back, which is what I feel like people are waiting for when they talk about the collapse.
Yeah, no, I don't think that either.
I know you don't think that. So this kind of brings me, I want to read this comment from last we's episode.
Oh, we got another drama comment.
No,
for
it's not
Jessa.
a drama comment. And I'm reading this because I think this is maybe the sentiment that a few different people share. And so I just want to clarify some things. Okay. The reason we want right-wing people to be punished through a system that we don't support is because they are actually working to hurt unempowered people in a real way. If his circumstances were 90% of the rest of the entire world, not only would he being Trump, I guess, have lost the election, he would be in jail. Most people do not have the energy to affect this. We're just trying to live and eat. Yes, we do have the ability to create our own realities, but it's really fucking difficult to focus attention on that when we're struggling to eat and have shelter. The MAGA people literally don't think that some people on the left exist at all, let alone allowing them to exist. I'm not communicating in a way that represents my thoughts and feelings about this accurately, so forgive me. You did a lot of drugs when it was illegal and you never suffered punishment. Have you ever wondered how that may have worked out if you had a different skin color or if you had been less pretty and blonde? As much as you may think our reality is created by our individual minds, spirits, wills, we need a majority to believe in a thing for it to actually manifest. So how do we do that without tribalism? There are people who have enough money and resources that this doesn't matter, but that is the minority. The minority has full access to the strings that control the masses. We may not have to give our energy to that system if we had resources. I'll leave that part out. And then there was a second part of it. I watched that documentary By Now. How are we supposed to make a difference without trying to influence others? Were I a millionaire or in a relationship with one, I'd like to think I would work to make a difference. Okay. I don't know how much of this kind of projection stuff I want to get into, but
That comment's like so confusing to me. I don't know if I'm struggling to the way it's written. It's like I read it twice originally and I was like, I don't quite understand what the point this person's making, but it was just me.
yeah, Mark's not a millionaire.
Yeah, well, and I don't know if that was even the reference that they were making to it.
Yeah.
Like if they were referencing that, like because you are with me and I'm a millionaire, you would do something different. But
yeah, so here's the thing, and I self-censored quite a bit in the last few years when this kind of sentiment was going around in spirituality spaces. I really if you're not on the Patreon, I don't know how much I've talked about this here, but I really internalized that idea of privilege. And, the joke I've made is I went from spending an entire life being ashamed of being poor to like the day I stopped being poor, I then internalized the idea of privilege. And then I'm ashamed of not being poor. No one's a millionaire, but it would be okay if we were. And lumping humans into large groups of things and making these kind of assumptions about them. Like, I don't know who left this comment, but I see a lot of like white people saying this stuff about other white people. And one of the worst things I've done in the last 5-10 years to someone was treat someone really shitty because I dehumanize them based on my assumptions about their privilege because they were rich and pretty. And I just was like, oh, everything's been handed to you in life, so I don't have to treat you with like humanization. And so I personally do not subscribe to that way of looking at things. I'm only bringing this up. I'm not actually triggered like I was on the Ken Walker thing here. I'm only bringing this up because I think these conversations have become really disempowering for people who have internalized this. And it's also like created a lot of shame for people who now perceive themselves to be too privileged to have anything to say. You did a lot of drugs when it was illegal. You never suffered punishment. First of all, I never said I didn't suffer punishment, and that was not the point of what I was saying there, but I'll go back to that. Have you ever wondered if how that would have worked out if you had a different skin color? Well, I'm assuming that you haven't listened to my full body of work, but I didn't have teeth in my 20s. My teeth immediately fell out when I started doing math because they had already started to fall out because I was so poor growing up that I didn't go to a dentist. I think I went to the dentist once or twice because there was a dentist in our school at one of my schools. There is definitely an issue with racial prejudice in police and how they treat innocent, and by that I mean not committing crimes, people of color. But cops are not nice to drug addicts, no matter what their color is. I've been assaulted by police. I've had other white women friends be sexually assaulted by police. I think I was never forced to suck their dicks because my teeth were like weird glass shards and nobody was trying to get a late onset circumcision. But I was treated horribly by police. I was raised by a meth addict. I was molested by a non-white person who had a better social standing because my mom sold drugs. So when I went to authorities at school, nobody believed me because he was like a bishop or something, I don't know, at his church, and my mom was an obvious drug addict. So it's somewhat dehumanizing to just lump people into these things. And there's absolutely, you know, the system is set up to benefit the people that it's set up to benefit. But just, I don't know. That conversation has really become an avenue for dehumanizing people. And so
what made you fully come out of that? Like when you were in that, whatever, 2020, 2021, where it was like this privilege thing where you were really like taking that on. What made you finally like loosen the reins on that?
I have a deep shame that I carry with me. And I don't know if that's just like, I think the person who sexually abused me from the ages of 6 to 9 used shame as a way to get me to stay quiet. I think my mother's inability to, you know, like hold space for feelings or whatever. I carry a very deep kind of underlying shame. So it's very easy for me to fall into I'm bad. And the conversation around white privilege, which I'm not saying doesn't exist,
right,
you know, but I don't think the overcorrection of like you're inherently bad because you're white. Like I just don't now, after sitting with it for 5 years, I don't think it's a productive conversation. Like my voice is shaking even talking about it. I think that, you know, I've also been really unhealthy for a lot of my life. Like I had a lot of things to work through, and a lot of that healing didn't happen until, you know, the last 20 years. And so I've harmed people in my life. Like I've talked about this. I had probably, I guess, every symptom of BPD until my mid 30s. And so I showed up toxic, and I carry a lot. I carry a lot of just kind of natural shame and regret for ways that I hurt people, let people down. You know, my oldest daughter, I left her with family while I was on drugs. She didn't see me for 10 years. So I think it's pretty easy to access that. And then I think that reality loads at whatever perspective you look at. And I have an open head center in human design. Remember when this podcast was about human design? And so I take on ideas. And then when I look at the world through those ideas, it lines up. And so when you look at yourself through the lens of everything I'm doing is because I'm a privileged white person or whatever, it's just, it all fits. You know, you can make that all match. And then I have a desire to like save people from their own suffering, you know? And so it does also, I think, play into a savior complex. And then I already was dealing with this as I, you know, for people who don't know my history, like, I was raised poor. Like, there was poor people before now, just in case. Like, I think people think that every boomer was handed a house for free. Like, there were poor people. My dad lived in a trailer until I was 11. Well, I guess he lived in a house when I was little with like 5 other men, 5 roommates. And then he was in a trailer until I was 10 or 11. I shared a room that's the size of our closet now with 2 siblings. My mom got out of her trailer when I was 6, I guess, because that's when I started getting abused by my best friend's dad. And she only got that because she fell in love with someone who had a house, and he got a house for cheap from his grandfather, but then they didn't have enough money to like maintain it. So like we didn't have heat some winters. We had a hole in the roof going into the kitchen that just had a tarp over it for years. You could see your breath in our house. We ate our like super processed food out of margarine dishes. You know, it's just like poor people existed before now. And I also see this kind of mass dehumanization of like boomers and like as if nobody struggled before now. And so there are a lot of people struggling, and it's a lot more difficult, but there have been poor people for a very long time. And I had so much poverty programming and so much beliefs that and this was a huge story in my life, like I was from the wrong side of the tracks. I wasn't the right kind of woman. A lot of my life, because then I got into Christianity and it was a prosperity church, so that I'm around all these rich people. I remember this like couple invited me and my husband because I got married when I was 16. We were extremely poor. I've had cars repossessed. I've been evicted for non-payment. I remember we went out to eat at a fondue restaurant, and I ordered like bread, and that was it because we didn't think like, because we could, and I was just sweating through the whole meal because I knew we couldn't pay our part of the check. Like, payday loans. Like, I've had the full range of, I don't know how many cars I've had taken by the cops because I couldn't afford the insurance, you know? And so I had the majority of my life lived in poverty. And when I started to find my way out of it, which I focused a shit ton of energy on understanding, it's a huge part of my life path, I immediately had survivor's guilt. Like immediately, before these ideas started kind of becoming mainstream on social media, I was already dealing with survivor's guilt. I was already dealing with the feeling like I had abandoned people on the wrong side of the tracks. Like, you know, now I was assimilating with the other people, you know, so that was already there. And so I think when these ideas kind of came online massively in an unhealthy way, I would say in 2020, turned into like Salem witch trial energy. I started, I think that now this version of me can be perceived as someone who has like, it's very nice that you think I'm pretty. Like, I've not been conventionally pretty. I didn't have teeth in my entire 20s. There is nobody thinks anyone's pretty without teeth. Like, there is no body positivity movement for people without teeth. You know, there aren't like groups of people who are like, I actually prefer my partners with less teeth. Like, I was not pretty. Nobody thought I was pretty. And then I've was really overweight for a lot of my life. And now that is culturally accepted. But, when I was young and overweight, it was Fiona Apple. It was the body expectation, And so I think this has really kind of forced me to be like, other people's stories are like their stories. And that's just, if that's your perception, you're going to look at me a moment in time and say, you're rich, which I'm not, but it would be fine if I was, and pretty, which thank you. My body type came into style when I hit 40. And so that was nice. It was a nice moment to have during my midlife crisis. But what I've learned through this is that people are individuals with individual experiences, and lumping large groups of people together based on, especially people you don't even know from anywhere other than the internet, is dehumanizing. And you can go, well, they deserve to be dehumanized because they have more power, and that's fine. But that's not a really healthy way to move through the world. And because of the experience I had where I did that to someone I perceived as having more power than me, I kind of course, thought I was the victim, because when we think we're the victims is when we do the shittiest stuff to other people. I thought I was the victim, and I wasn't like holding compassion for this person or empathy for this person because she was prettier than me. She was younger than me. She was rich, and her life was great. And so therefore, her pain doesn't matter, and it's not real, and whatever. And on the other side of that, when I had to live through the fucking overwhelming guilt and shame, like legitimate guilt or shame and remorse for having treated someone like that, that really helped me heal the part of me that was absorbing that from other people's perception. It's dehumanizing. We all have the desire to dehumanize other people. We all have the desire to be violent. And what this kind of movement of throwing large groups of people into boxes and then going, well, you have power. I perceive that you have power. Therefore, I am allowed to be violent, and I am allowed to dehumanize you, and whatever is, go for it, go for it. But I'm not participating in that. And I'm also not absorbing that. I didn't really plan on getting into all of that, but it's actually a huge part of my story has a lot to do with why I was hiding out. That was a lot for me to sort through. And two things can be true at the same time. We can be living in a world that is oriented in supremacy culture, but it is also supremacy culture to say, well, now automatically, if your skin is this color or you're this gender, then you are at the bottom of the food chain, is also supremacy culture. We're just switching the spots. And so this comment is kind of an example of just some assumptions made. So my closest friends were Black when I was doing drugs. One of them did go to jail a lot. The other one did not. Like, my best friend and I did not go to jail. We were often caught in the same places. We were both kind of weird, and both of our hustles just happened to be non-criminal. I was like the resident spiritual coach, and he did hair and did crafts. And so when the cops would roll in, I would be in a pile of papers talking about aliens, and he would be, doing my hair or playing with Barbies or something. He would like restore old dolls. Now, that being said, if someone needed to go outside and tell the cops to come back with a warrant, it was always me. And that is because while I still did get tossed around a few times, I was less likely to get tossed around or mistreated. I also didn't catch any charges until the end of my addiction. So I also was like in the least danger for that reason. But so, yes, those two things can exist at the same time. But when we're talking about police and racial prejudice, we're talking about the effect and the impact that has on like innocent people trying to live their, like, we're talking about them killing people who are not committing crimes. Not that they have the right to kill people who are committing crimes, but I think it is like really dehumanizing to assume that they are nice to drug addicts, because they're not. They're horrible to drug addicts and homeless people and people that are not, all of my white friends did time. Like that this just kind of idea that has been perpetuated on the internet that cops are cool to, because it's different now, but like when I was doing drugs, being hot, like being on drugs was a crime. Like possession is what they would have to get you on, but it was a crime to be a drug addict. And so, yeah, I don't know. That made me really nervous to even kind of talk about, but this is like the internet has turned a lot of these important conversations into a new type of like us versus them amongst each other.
Well, and they're actually really nuanced conversations.
Extremely.
That have, as you can tell, just the way you unpacked it, all of that. I mean, that was really good. Like I think in 2020, it wasn't a nuanced conversation. It was such a quick assumption that like, here are the bad people, here are the good people, now go and fight. And you could see, I mean, if that just kept playing out, the culture eats itself. You don't really have to control people. If there was like a corporate kind of entity that's trying to get rid of people, it's just, you just throw out ideas like that really do enrage people, and they become passionate because they do feel like they are experiencing inequality. That then you could see how that would just, everybody eats themselves alive. It's also, as you were talking about it makes me think it really is an effect of the cross of planning kind of moving out and going into this individualized reality where you have all the people that many people have been experiencing inequality on many different levels, and at the same time watching certain people succeed and thrive in life that don't seem to be experiencing any of the inequality and maybe have a leg up. They have some kind of advantage, but some of them worked hard to get there. They did come from poverty. They did come from some kind of abuse and inequality, and they worked hard to get there. And now we're throwing those people in the bad box because like they're just a part of a group that there are some that are, trying to kind of perpetuate the inequality and like keep the pyramid the way it is. But you can see it as like the cross of planet as it goes out. We're trying to solve the inequality by still trying to get everybody on the same page, knocking down people that have the perceived privilege that actually worked for it, and based on the assumption that like success is bad. It means that you have privilege, and so it just feels like an effect of trying to get from an old system that has now, it benefited us at one point, but it's now become kind of sick and upside down, trying to get to a new one, realizing like the only way to get to the new one is to be autonomous and worry about your own life and not police everyone else. Like, we're not going to get to equality that way. We end up kind of, I think the culture would eat itself.
This is actually a conversation we could go like 1,000 different directions in, but you have a session and this episode was supposed to come out last night. So,
or we could continue it on next episode, maybe.
Yeah, we can continue it on the next episode.
Because there's a lot to get into. It is very nuanced.
There is a lot to get into. So I didn't really plan to go that far into that conversation, but I guess I'm glad we did. So I just want to clarify what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the government. And this is my belief about the government. If it's not your belief about the government, that's fine. There are so many people talking about spirituality who are like registered Democrats and very bought into that system. There is no shortage of people holding that perspective. You can just go listen to people that have that perspective. It just simply is not my perspective. And that doesn't mean I'm right, because all things exist. If you believe in the government, then you're going to live in a world where the government is impacting your life in that way. This is my belief about the government, and I'll try to cliff note this as hard as possible. I believe that the current United States government, and it may have always been this way, but in my lifetime, it is people on the right who are power hungry. So we're going to say Congress people in the House, people in the upper whatever, that part of the government, what's that called? The legislative branch, are all bought out by corporate interests. That's all well documented. It's not even a conspiracy theory. Or they are blackmailed, meaning there are pictures and videos of them fucking children, or in some other way captured. And the people on the right pretend to care about Jesus.
Can you say that on YouTube? Fucking children.
I believe so. I'll blank it out. There are people in there that are probably really Christians, a couple of them, because in the same way that there are actual, maybe one or two actual leftists on the other side, just so that you have someone to cling to and think that it's authentic. But they make laws that benefit corporations. They make laws that benefit people that give them money. They're there for power and money. That's it. And because they've been compromised. I think specifically like people who may have, I think most of them are blackmailed. And they're blackmailed by the corporate interests, whatever. You don't get that high up there if one of those things doesn't exist. And then you have people on the left and they pretend to care about abortion and trans rights and whatever. And they don't care about those things. And that's why their moral compass shifts. That's why they didn't want gay marriage and suddenly they did want gay marriage. And I would call the Democrats, and this is being passed around on TikTok, so this isn't a unique idea, but the Democrats, I would call it controlled opposition. The Democrats exist to give you somewhere to put all of your progressive hopes. You know, they talk about socialism or socialized medicine or whatever when it's convenient. So rather than coming together in your local communities where you could actually change something and creating some sort of decentralized whatever, coming together and actually changing the world with each other, you just wait every 4 years to elect a new whatever. They all work together as far as I'm concerned. I don't know that they get together in a room and go wink, wink, we all work together, but their pockets are all being greased by the same people. They all own the same stocks. They all been blackmailed by the same groups. And so they work together and they use your social issues to get you to put your energy into that thing. Now, spiritually, I believe that this is an energy harvesting operation run by a war god. Notice that both sides are fucking warmongers, and that everyone lives in the same aquarium. And the trick is to give some people a nice spot in the aquarium and some people a shitty spot in the aquarium, and that will keep them fighting about that. But in reality, the vast majority of people live inside of the matrix, and the things that they tell you don't mean anything. He said he was going to build a wall. He didn't build a wall. Biden said he was going to codify Obama said he was going to codify Roe v. Wade. He didn't. Biden said he was going to forgive student debt. He didn't. So the way that they pull everyone into this kind of like this ritual every 4 years and get you to give your power over to it, and also just like exhaust so much energy fighting with your fellow man over these social issues that these people do not care about. They're psychopaths. They do not care about these fucking social issues. And so that is why it doesn't matter if the Democrats happen to say that they care about things that I care about. It doesn't make it like that's just an excuse they're using to get that energy. Now, for me personally, I don't fuck with that system, meaning I don't empower that system. And that's my perspective, and no one's obligated to have that. But I don't call cops on people because I don't want to empower that system. That doesn't mean I think every single person who's a cop is bad. I also don't subscribe to the dehumanization of that. But the system that they are a part of, I don't empower it. So unless I have to make an insurance claim, that's not how I solve my problems. I have not received child support for any of my children because I will not take their dads to, it sounds like I have a shit ton of children's dads. I have one child who's older who had a dad I never took to court for child support, and I don't take my 2 current kids' dad to child. You don't have to do that. But I don't, because I don't use the court system to solve my problems. And that's because I don't give that thing power as an authority. Now, if masses of people divested from giving that thing authority, it would collapse, because you don't create reality with your mind, you create it with your perspective. It's not your thoughts, it's your perspective. If your perspective is that thing is daddy, then that thing is daddy. So when Trump is being taken to court and y'all are cheering for it, when the January 6 people are getting put in prison for the rest of your life and y'all are cheering for it, you don't realize you're being tricked into empowering that system. On the streets, you don't call cops on each other. Like, in some ways, criminals have a better sense of integrity than your average person, from my perspective, which is why for a long time I wouldn't fuck with people who weren't drug addicts. Now, there was rats and they were treated very poorly, but you and I could be fighting about something and it could be violent, it could be horrible, but we don't call the cops. Why? Because the cops are the common enemy. And it's like weird rat cop shit. So what I have noticed is people who were screaming ACAB in the streets in 2020 were then like cheering for January 6 people to go to jail for what was essentially a protest. I may not agree with that protest, but the hypocrisy there, I don't understand. I don't care more about that dumb fucking building than I care, a government building, than I care about a local liquor store that was burned down in one of the major cities in protest. Protest is protest. So what the left, right, fucking good guy, bad guy, whatever thing does is it gets you to cheer for the rights being taken from the other side so that they can turn around and take your rights. If you cheer for quote unquote disinformation to be censored off the internet, don't get upset when your Palestine tweets are being taken down. You cheered for that. You're getting tricked. Donald Trump's not going to go do fucking hard time. But you putting all your energy into pro-justice system is going to disproportionately hurt Black and brown people. That's the hypocrisy I'm speaking to. The system isn't the answer. And so I get that you think that you're trying to get it, but you're being tricked into it. The system's not going to take him down. He's a billionaire. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's my perspective. If you hold a different perspective, that's fine. I don't know how. This has been my perspective for 2.5 decades. And there's just now, because of the internet, finally proof that my perspective is maybe a little more valid. But if you have a hard time hearing that from me because you feel like I have privilege or whatever, there's plenty of Black anarchists to go listen to that will tell you kind of the same thing. But until masses of people divest from the idea of the state as daddy, the state will, and by the way, the left isn't helping you pay your bills. And I'm saying this as someone who's probably too far left to even be involved in politics. The Democrats are not helping you pay your bills. Biden's been in office for 4 years. It's never been harder to survive. You know, that's not, and I'm not going to get into the propaganda around getting you to fucking dehumanize each other on each and other side. I guess I could at some point, but we don't have time for that today. But that's my perspective for why the justice system has to cease to be an option for us to solve our problems, in order for the justice system to stop causing harm. And I am not personally of the belief that if you fill this thing with women so that they can be the warmongers committing genocide and fucking, promoting corporate interests, that's going to fix it. I think the system is rotten. It's doing exactly what it was supposed to do, which is to benefit a small group of people. And what I'm speaking about is actually solidarity across the working class. When I'm talking about tribalism, I'm talking about homogenizing humans according to whatever box you've assigned them to, rather than letting individuals show up as individuals and contribute as individuals with what they have. So an example of this is like there's an expectation for Democrats to all hold these very specific beliefs, and no one's allowed in that cult to say, well, I don't actually agree with this part, or I do think this is a nuanced conversation. If you do that on the internet, you're going to get canceled and torn to shreds. That's tribalism. Individuality doesn't mean we don't come together as a group. It means we come together as a group with individuals, and we see them each as individuals. We don't go, because you're a woman, you've had this experience, or because you're white, you're this, or because you're whatever, you're this, and because you're a Democrat, you have to be okay with every single thing that this person has done. Like that's homogenized, whatever. And also it just doesn't matter. It's going away. It kind of, like, from my perspective, and you can hold a different perspective for sure, but this podcast is our perspectives. It's just going away. It doesn't matter, if you think it's good or bad. It just isn't the game that we're going to play next.
I think a lot of people are also afraid of like the individualization idea. I think some people see it as selfish, and so that's like, oh, you're just going to worry about yourself. But then there's a lot of people that I'm assuming, I don't know if I have confirmation of this, but that everyone's afraid of not having a daddy or some kind of group of people that can be trusted, that then regulate the quote crazies in the reality. So people that, I think a lot of people have like resistance to individuality, because that means we just let everybody do what they want, and that's going to mean chaos, because the diversity of everyone. Some people are psychopaths. Some people are just very niche and weird, and they do things weird. And we can't allow those people to be powerful in the society because they're fucking weird. Like I think people are afraid of not having the rules and regulations as a safety net to keep, so we don't like go crazy and kill each other, And I think that is an illusion. I think those things get worked out. If we go into an individualized, like kind of community-based thing, those things work themselves out. But I don't think we have any examples in culture that show that that's going to happen. We've always relied on some daddy keeping everyone in line. And I also think that like makes me think of an aspect of the internet that I think is we're all experiencing. That some people are experiencing differently, but the way we're connected to everybody across the globe now, you're able to go online and, look at some of these social apps in a matter of 10 minutes and see such a wide variety of people that have different experiences, different thoughts on life, and you're able to see them all back to back so fast. So we've never been able to do that before. And in some ways, it's hard to sometimes see the different perspectives and different experiences people have that are so in contrast to your own that it's hard to understand those people. And I think immediately everybody comes into this judgmental kind of put them in boxes. And that's also, it's like an aspect of being able to see that diversity. It's beautiful in the long run if we can see that that's like, it's so beautiful the different ways humans express themselves and how they are, where there is a place like in the future for every single person, no matter what you look like, where you come from, what you're into, for you to do what you love and thrive. But we're coming from a society where it's like we weren't able to see all of those, the different types of people. You couldn't see people on the other side of the world that live in a different perspective and paradigm. Like we couldn't connect to those people. And so in doing that, like I think at the same time, like where we're wanting to decentralize and not have some daddy, it's hard for people to jump to that because they're for the first time seeing there are some really different people in the world, and they're not wrong necessarily. Like they're doing what they want to do and how they want to do it. But I think that's an aspect of like kind of why this is so difficult to get people off of the rules and regulations, because they believe that that's what's keeping everyone safe and kind of in line. And if we didn't have that, what is this weird person that I'm looking at on TikTok on the other side of the world? Like, if they're allowed to just be themselves and be an individual, like, what's going to stop them from coming to attack me or something, you know?
Right.
These irrational kind of thoughts. But I think that's the hardest thing that we have to like move through, is actually getting people to believe that like we can be okay without the rules and regulations. And I guess if it is based on like some of these really simple rules, like compassion and don't hurt other people, some people really enjoy hurting other people, you know? So like, what do you do about that? And I don't know, my belief is that those things will work themselves out in like ways that are hard to understand, that I don't know if I even understand, but I have a feeling that that's the only way forward, you know? But
yeah, this transition's not going to be super easy for people who are wired for tribalism. And many, I would say most people kind of getting glitched when I talk about what I talk about, and then people go, so we're going to be alone? Like that's all they can hear. I would say you're probably like naturally wired for tribalism. And so we have lived in a world for your whole lifetime that was made for you. And people like me and Mark and a lot of people who are currently stepping into their power, like I'm an individual. I'm wired to be an individual, not meaning I'm not supposed to be a part of groups, but meaning I have really struggled to assimilate in a world where it's like, this is what manners are, but the manners feel fake to me. This is how you're supposed to act. This is what you're supposed to look like. That's tribalism. The tribe gets together and decides this is what is beautiful. This is what is, these are the rules. This is what time you're supposed to get up in the morning. This is how you're supposed to behave at work, whatever. And it has felt like petting a cat backwards for me my entire life, because I need the rules to make sense to me. I need the way that I move through the world to make sense to me. So I have lived in a world of dissonance my entire life, where a lot of people find comfort in what is the established thing. What do the experts say? That never made sense to me. It's like, well, how are you an expert? Oh, because you read a book of someone else's perspective and you got a degree from someone I don't know. Now you're an expert in my life. Like that shit never made sense to me. Individuality, I'm talking about self-governance. You make your own decisions for yourself. I make my own decisions for myself. We come together if it makes sense. If it doesn't, it's not a huge fucking deal. No one is obligated to operate in some sort of social, like, manners kind of whatever way. You're not forced to assimilate. And that is so empowering once we make that switch, that you will see, I believe, less crime, less whatever, because the outcasts I think there will always be psychopaths, probably, until we reach a certain level of consciousness. But there will be a lot of, quote unquote crime or whatever in the interim. The illusion is that these crimes were being solved anyway.
Right. Yeah,
like,
that's the thing.
I've had my car stolen. I've been sexually assaulted. Like the cops aren't solving crimes.
Yeah, the
This
rules
isn't
and regulations
fucking,
are not really
You've
working.
watched way too many cop shows. Like none of that stuff's actually being solved, And so, that's a huge statement. That's a big blanket statement. But I think the propaganda of you're being kept safe by the tribe it's just that. It's like tribal propaganda. I think that tribes can be great for people who are still very tribally minded and don't love the autonomy part. You can get together with small groups of resident people and be all tribal, just like I had to figure out how to be an individual in a world that wasn't built for me. But you're not getting 330 million people on the same page. Yeah. And now you're not even getting them on one of two pages. And so the two-party politics is also it's just not going to work. It's going to fall apart. And so, I feel like we talk about this constantly, but it is also, I think, the premise of reality going forward and the conversation about what it means to be autonomous and individual, how to make this transition It's like, you want my honest 2 cents? Find ways to get together with groups of people and build a world where it doesn't matter who the president is. Like, if you want to work in the direction of the energy, find a way to subvert the authority you don't agree with. And also, I would say, spend a little time listening to, like, spend some time in the present moment with what's the reality of what's happening in your life and in people who you're actually connected to's lives. In the present moment, and a little less time traveling to what you think is going to happen, because that's time traveling to what you think is going to happen is really bad for your nervous system. And it will have you living in some people are already living in the Handmaid's Tale, and the fucking motherfucker's not even in office yet.
Yeah.
So divesting means, like, I'm going to change the things I can change, and I'm going to divest from the things I can't. And I am going to divest from a system that allowed this person to get in office, like, period. If that's your perspective, that this is it, then I'm going to divest from the system that got this person in office. And I'm just going to focus on me and my local community. And if people started to take the energy that they put into all of that circus and find groups of people that they are resonant with, and find, pool resources and get together and start to live together on a little piece of land or in a house together and start to create community locally with actual physical human beings in your physical world, and just pretend that shit doesn't exist and learn hacks for things, and, go to somewhere and pool your resources where there is access to the things you want. Like, that's where you're being pushed. Like, that's where reality's pushing you. You can keep shadow boxing what everyone else is doing, but the lesson is pushing you towards self-empowerment. And so to take this back to the beginning, I stopped talking about this publicly for a long time because everything I said, I ran through the lens of, is this going to be perceived as privilege or whatever? Here, I want you to put yourself in my shoes. The things I'm saying are, I believe, to be deeply beneficial to your life. Deeply beneficial to your life. The people who have applied these things have found benefit. I have found benefit from learning these things. That's why I'm sharing them. What is the benefit to me? Like, I also do understand the perspective of, like, privilege. I do understand that. I'm not saying that's not true. I'm not saying white privilege or whatever is not true. But some of these stories about I can't because I'm a woman are disempowering. And it's a trap you can't get out of. If you, like, you can be someone who has experienced oppression, or you could be someone who is oppressed. One of those is an identity that traps you on a timeline. One of those tells a story about experiences you've had in the past. Yeah. If I don't talk about this because I'm afraid of being perceived as privileged or, like, tone deaf or whatever, which I just can't be tone deaf with the life experiences I've had. It just doesn't make any fucking sense. But I'm afraid of it. I was afraid of being perceived that way, because if you look at it through that lens, it looks like it. Then I am not talking about the only actual lifeline that I know. Like, I'm trying to tell you the ways to empower and move out of this. And for years I stopped talking about it because it had been kind of painted as, like, the conversation around creating your reality is, like, easy for you to say or whatever. It's like, yeah, it is easy for me to say, because I fucking clawed my way out of the matrix. So it is now easy for me to say yes. But I was saying this when there wasn't a lot of evidence of it in my life also. These fucking episodes give me so much vulnerability hangover.
You said a lot of really important things. On a very nuanced topic. I think it was really...
Yeah, I can't wait to put it out and be nauseous.
Well, we can pick it up on the next episode, because I do have to run to a session right now.
Yeah, we're recording next week's episode day after tomorrow, so we can...
We'll be fresh.
Thank you for just sitting here while I just fucking rant sometimes. I feel...
No, it's great. I learned some stuff myself. Okay, I love you. Bye.
Love you. Bye. Just record. You can leave. Okay. So Mark is in the process of building a website so that you don't have to go through some sort of mysterious internet journey to book with him. I am about to open sessions back up, but I am going to only be doing relationship sessions for a while because I am working on a project. We'll see if I give birth to it, but working on a project about relationships. So I just kind of want to focus my energy in sessions in that direction. So I'll be doing, it can be friendships, relationships, and I won't be doing a lot of them, but and that's at least for the next couple of months. And then I am also offering like a couples thing. And as always, for me, sessions are, you're renting my perspective. I am not credentialed. I only have my own life experience and perspective. If you would like to know my perspective on relationships, you can listen to the Soberish episode, Interdependence Bill of Rights, or the AOD episode, Love 1 or 2, to get that perspective. If you would like that perspective pointed at your relationship dynamic, whether it be relationship, trying to get over a twin flame, whatever. And then also I'm going to try to do some sessions with two people at the same time, applying the same thing for couples. So, and then Mark, if you just type in Mark Pontius Acuity, he does sessions for like creatives. He can really help people in like creative blocks. If you're into human design, anything about like projectors, he's really into. And then if you just want to have like weird woo conversations with him, we both have Patreons. You could just look up Jessa Reed Patreon, or jessareed.com has all of my stuff. And soon markpontius.com will have all of his stuff. All right. See you next week. Love you. Bye.